If you walked into the Oak Ridge Hospital back in May of 1974, you would have seen federal agents pulling 12 thick paper folders out of the filing cabinets and throwing them into plastic bags. They did not ask for permission, they did not sign any checkout forms, and they did not speak a single word to the nurses standing at the front desk. In less than 2 minutes, 4,000 pages of blood tests, brain scans, and doctor notes were wiped clean from the building records as if those men never existed. The official story printed in the local paper said 12 lab workers died from a bad gas leak, but the paper charts left behind tell a story that will make your skin crawl. You look at the stolen medical log under file DIA-88 and notice something very wrong about the way those 12 men arrived at the emergency room that night. There were no burn marks on their clothes, no chemical smells on their skin, and no signs of smoke sitting in their lungs. Yet their hearts were beating at over 200 times a minute, while their blood pressure was so low the nurses could barely find a pulse. The doctors tried using normal medicine to calm their bodies down, but every needle they pushed into their arms bent like soft plastic against their skin. Ask yourself why armed military officers would race into a public hospital at 3 in the morning to steal simple blood test papers from everyday lab workers. You look at the floor map of the isolation room where they locked the 12 men before the truck showed up to haul them away. The guards did not install plastic sheets or air filters over the doors to stop a virus from spreading into the hallways. They nailed heavy sheets of solid lead straight into the door frames to block a strong electrical signal coming out of the men's bodies. Look at the perimeter guard notes signed under file NRO-12, just 30 minutes before the main server lights went totally dark across the whole facility. The head nurse wrote in dark blue ink that every time she stepped near the beds, the hands on her watch started spinning backward instantly. The 12 scientists sat straight up in their cots, staring at the ceiling without blinking once under the bright white room lights. Outside in the parking lot, 3 ambulances trying to start their engines had their electrical wires melt into hot glue in a fraction of a second. When you flip to the physical inventory sheet signed by the night guard 2 days later, the lies in the official news story fall apart completely. The government told the news that the 12 scientists were cremated right away because of a dangerous chemical hazard in their lungs. But the hospital supply sheet shows that DIA agents brought in 12 huge metal storage tanks filled with freezing liquid ice at 4 in the morning. You do not bring in ice tanks to burn dead bodies. You bring them in to keep living tissue frozen while you move it out of sight. If you put on the headphones and play the audio tape recorded inside the hospital room, you hear Dr. Eris Thorne trying to talk to Project lead Dr. Marcus Vance. Vance speaks in a cold, flat voice without stopping to take a breath, reading out long lines of numbers like a machine reading code. You hear the loud metallic pump of the oxygen tanks clicking over and over in the quiet background, while Thorne asks Vance if he can feel his fingers. Vance ignores the doctor and whispers that he can hear what people are saying in 3 different houses down the street. That single line on the tape makes you freeze, forcing you to pull up the technical notes hidden in the CIA 44 folder behind the main file. The 12 scientists were not fixing power lines or testing normal jet engines inside the underground bunker that night. They were sitting around a 3-foot piece of smooth gray metal pulled out of the ocean floor off the coast of California. For 3 months straight, the team attached small wires to their own heads to measure the strange energy coming off the metal surface. You start lining up the brain scan papers with the main power grid charts from the electrical plant down the road. As the power turned up inside the lab, the brain waves of all 12 men locked into the exact same pattern at 40 beats a second. Their skin temperature dropped 6 degrees in less than half a minute, even though the room air was getting hot enough to melt plastic cups. They were not sick from a simple gas spill. Their brain cells were changing shape to match the metal object sitting on the table. What happened next was wiped out of military books and hidden in a dark basement room for more than 40 years. The brain scans did not show bleeding or brain damage. They showed the pathways in their heads reconnecting at a speed no doctor had ever seen before. The nervous system inside their bodies was rewiring itself to work like the copper circuits inside an old radio receiver. On the tape, you hear the doctor scream at his team to cut the power wires right before the speaker cuts out to loud static. His skin is changing. Then came a heavy silence that lasted for 12 seconds while the hospital power meters jumped by 400% for no clear reason. The light bulbs along the hallway ceiling popped one by one, sending hot glass across the floor while the air in the room turned freezing cold. When the emergency lights flickered back on, the 12 men were sitting on their beds, staring directly at the door as if they were waiting for a signal. The 12 scientists were not hurt by a bad accident. Their minds had been taken over by an outside power. Now follow what the military squad did when they kicked open the hospital room doors with guns out at 3:20 in the morning. Instead of putting the sick men onto normal rolling beds with warm blankets, they slapped thick lead helmets over their heads and strapped their arms down tight. The soldiers were wearing heavy rubber suits, not to keep from catching a cold, but to shield their own skin from the electric shock coming off the men. The shipping paper shows the 12 scientists were loaded into sealed steel boxes and driven away toward a hidden base in the desert. Think about what those lead helmets really mean when you read the equipment lists attached to the back of the transport paper. If those workers were just sick from breathing bad fumes in a lab, putting heavy metal boxes over their heads makes no sense at all. The military was not helping sick patients. They were locking up 12 living radio towers that were screaming data through their skull bones. The bodies of those men had turned into biological tools broadcasting information that the government wanted to keep secret at all costs. This is where your chest gets tight, because you realize the DIA did not steal those paper files to avoid paying medical bills or cover up a mistake. They erased those records because the test proved that standing near these strange objects alters human DNA and brain cells forever. If you stay near that energy for too long, your brain stops working like a human mind and connects to a much bigger network. The 12 scientists did not die in that lab. They were rewritten, and their medical papers showed the exact blueprint of how it happened. Hit the subscribe button right now and drop a comment below if you want us to keep pulling real files and showing you what is hidden behind closed doors. Your support is the only thing that keeps this channel digging through old boxes, connecting forgotten clues, and bringing you the truth every single week. Look at the terrible domino effect this single night had on the families left behind waiting for news that never came. Within 3 days of the hospital raid, federal agents walked into the homes of all 12 men and took away their personal journals, photos, and letters. Their wives were given fake death papers saying their husbands died of heart attacks, along with warnings that talking to neighbors would land them in prison. The names of the 12 scientists were erased from college books, their research papers were burned, and their bank accounts were closed down overnight. Why spend so much money and time to erase 12 smart scientists from history books as if they never walked on this earth? Because telling the truth meant admitting that human minds can be altered and controlled by forces we cannot stop or understand with normal tools. If normal people found out that human brain cells can be reprogrammed like a computer chip, everyone would lose faith in reality. The lie was built to keep you feeling safe, believing that your mind belongs only to you and nobody else. Look at the blood test paper that survived the file cleanout, found hidden inside an old shoebox in the hospital basement years later. A blood sample drawn from Dr. Vance right before the military trucks pulled up showed his red blood cells were no longer made of normal iron. The tiny particles inside his blood were lining up like small metal pins that moved whenever a radio tower sent out a signal. That small tube of blood proved that exposure to the object turned human flesh into a living receiver. Here is the most scary piece of information found inside old building reports long after the hospital room was knocked down and turned into a parking lot. In October of 1998, a routine check at a deep underground base in Nevada listed 12 life support pods running on main electrical power. The paper showed 12 human bodies, kept asleep under heavy drug doses and lead shields, had not aged a single day in over 24 years. Their brain graphs were still showing the exact same 40-beat wave pattern recorded the night their papers were stolen. The cold truth of what happened to those men hits you right in the gut the moment you connect the dates on those building papers. The 12 scientists did not die in 1974, and their bodies were never buried in the ground or burned to dust like their families were told. They have been kept alive in glass tanks deep underground for 50 years, used as living parts to help military engineers run flight controls on recovered objects. Their names were taken away, their files were burned, and their bodies were turned into living computer parts for black-budget projects. You close the paper folder and sit back in your seat as the room goes completely quiet around you in the dark. The DIA did not run into that hospital to hide a bad accident. They came to harvest 12 human brains that had successfully linked up with non-human technology. They poured thick concrete over the old lab, wiped every doctor note from history, and locked the living men in a hole where no family could ever find them. The yellow paper sitting on your desk is not an accident report. It is a receipt for 12 stolen lives. Now that you know what really happened to those paper files, look down at your own hands and feel the pulse in your wrist tonight. We go through our daily lives thinking our bodies belong to us, safe behind the walls of our homes, and protected by normal medical science. But the stolen papers from file DIA-88 prove that under the right conditions, human flesh and bone can be rewritten like soft clay by forces we do not control. Those 12 men went to work as regular scientists, and they are still sitting in the dark underground today, running programs for someone else. The final question you need to ask yourself as you look out your window tonight is not whether those 12 tanks are still running under the desert sand. The real question is, if this energy can rewrite a human mind so fast, how many other lab teams have been changed the exact same way without anyone ever finding out? Think about that as you watch the dark sky tonight, because the boundary keeping your mind safe from the outside world is much thinner than you think.